Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. I am going to be talking about tribalism today, and I want us to have this discussion open-mindedly so that we can really see what has been ailing this country. And for the longest time, I strongly believe that Kenya has been one of the countries in Africa that has had the potential to achieve first world status. Kenya is not supposed to be a third world at this point because we have had everything that can make a first world country a first world country, but we haven't utilized it. And the reason, or one of the major reasons why that is because of tribalism. And this goes directly into our politics. And I need to give you a history of this. Why is it that Kenyans are so tribal? But before we get to that, I feel I need to give my position on tribalism. Now, I strongly believe that tribalism has no justification. Can you imagine hating someone for the tribe that they come from? If it's racism I can understand because the white men were the colonizers. So if someone feels some type of way about white people, I can understand it. I'm not saying I condone it, but I can understand it. Tribalism, on the other hand, totally unjustified. Why would you hate someone because of the tribe they come from? Why would you hate a Luo because he's a Luo? Why would you hate a Luya because he's a Luya? It doesn't make sense to me. Okay? It doesn't at all. And if you do have any logical justification for tribalism, please give me in the comments. Make it make sense to me why the modern day and age, someone would be tribal. Now, let's get back to the history of tribalism. So a few years back, because it's not that many, it's a few years back, something about say 150 years, the British and the other colonizers were drafting what they called their zones, or rather their protectorates. And Kenya at that time was called a British protectorate. They demarcated the borders. Okay, I need you to understand that before the white man came here, we were organized in our tribes. Our tribes were our nations. So the Kikuyus had the Kikuyu nation, the Kambas and the Kaba nation, the Luos had the Luo nation, and like that. Even this sub-regioning that we have, I don't know, Nilotes and Bantus, didn't exist at the time, because as far as tribes were concerned, each tribe was its own nation. Now, that being said, we come back now to the colonizer. He has demarcated the borders and has declared that this region, which we now call Kenya, is his protectorate. What does that mean for the people at the time? It means that they now have no option but to exist together. So they've now been brought a new reality where they are not just one nation united by the language they speak. They are now a bigger nation united by areas within that border. And they had to figure out how to coexist. And that is how, we were brought out of our tribal nations. It's not necessarily something that came out of our own initiative, but we were kind of forced to. We had to deal with it. And we did. All right? But given that it didn't come from us, we still had our tribal loyalties or our tribal affiliation. So it would be at that time where you'd find, yes, we are under a colonial government, but Kikuyus do their things on their own, Kambas do their things on their own. There was no that mingling as much. Over years, we would start to interact with each other more, we'd start to learn about each other more as the years went by. Eventually, it came at a point where the whole Kenya was united in one front, and they decided, you know what, the white man has to go. So we had freedom fighters all over the country, from central Kenya, from Luo Nyanza, from all over Kenya, and we all worked towards liberation of this country. And that was the first time where we kind of saw what a united Kenya looks like. And we succeeded in kicking the white man out. So now we have our own country. We've gained our independence. So what does this mean for us? What it does mean for us is now we can design our own systems of running the government. We can start doing our things our own way. And we did, except not entirely. See, this is why we get a problem, because the government that the white man was using to rule, or the system, the structure of governance that he was using, was the same one we adopted, only that this time we had black leaders and not white leaders. We didn't have the colonizer on the top. So we never really restructured the government to suit Kenya as it is. And understand, at the time, as much as we had worked on a united front, we still had the tribal loyalties, So now that became the Kenya that we now came to love and understand. Now we started getting independence, we've gotten independence rather, and we're now getting democracy. So we got into a point where we had to have elections, and that's when now tribalism came back in, because as far as the topmost seat in the country, which is the president, of all the contenders that were contending for a seat, they were working on, campaigning for that seat, and the first thing they needed to secure were their own people, their own tribe, and that kind of shaped the narrative that we go by today in our campaigns and in our electoral system, because every single time there's an election, the voting class will tend to appeal to their tribesmen first before appealing to other parts. So in a way, they continued to push tribalism as an agenda, such that you have to convince your own people first, and your own people will back you, on the narrative that this is our guy, he's from our tribe. All right. So it's not necessarily, you're not going to be elected by your people because of merit. It's more like, you're my person, you're our people, so we're going to elect you into just because of that. You could have the most bullshit agenda, you could have the most bullshit manifestos, you could have the most useless way of governing a country, but guess what? Your people will still be loyal to you, and that was the problem. That was the problem, because the moment we got into that system of campaigning, every politician was taking advantage of it, and they were castigating other tribal voting blocks while appealing to their own, such that if contender number one of the presidential seat is from this tribe, contender number two is from this tribe, they would pit these tribes against one another. And that's where tribalism started. So it wasn't necessarily something that came from the people, but from the leaders. And because of the influence they had, they now started instigating hate to the people. And we had our first tribal clashes in 1992, I believe. Yes. I think it was 1992. I'll fact check that, but it was 1992, I believe. And then later on, we would have Moi would come out of power in 2002, and at that time, when Kibaki was coming in, it wasn't necessarily as tribal, but the tribal undertones were still there. 2007, we had our biggest clashes as of yet, because we had these tribal voting blocks, and as far as the two contenders for the presidential seat, they were like, the margin of error between, the difference between the votes was like so small, and then one of them ended up stealing the election or rigging the election, and that led the country into a lot of chaos. So now, for what the president did, or the presidential candidate did, the whole tribe was attacked for it. And that's why I say it has no justification, because you can imagine the actions of one man at the topmost seat. He rigged the election and stole the votes, and basically did the other one an injustice, but the tribes or his tribesmen were the ones who were attacked for it. And that's the reason why I say tribalism has no justification. So that's just a brief history as to where tribalism comes from. Now, given that post-independence, tribalism is something that has been pushed by the electorate, or to the electorate by the leaders, what justification is there for it other than backing someone from your tribe? Now, over the years, the literacy levels in this country have gone high. People's understanding of governance has improved way much than you have expected. There has been a great shift in the way we see the world, in the way we see development, in the way we see governance, in the way we see food security, in the way we see policies. And yet, it's 2025, I go on Twitter and I still see tribal hate from, get this, fellow Gen Zs and millennials, because it's very hard to find an older generation, in these social media spaces as much as we have the millennials and Gen Zs. So they're the majority. And when you get into Twitter and some of these political conversations start coming up, you see the undertones. Well, they're not necessarily undertones, but it's just straight out tribal hate, like people speaking against each other, tribals. Oh, Kikuyus will never see power again, Luos will never see power again. And this is the problem. This is 2025 we're talking about. 2025. As a matter of fact, I challenge any of you, go to Twitter right now It's now called X. I hate that name. But go to Twitter right now and get into any of these political conversation groups, or these people that are big on talking politics. Get to see what the people commenting on those, or people who are posting on in those conversations are saying, and you get to see a lot of tribal hate. Go on TikTok, same. You go on Facebook, same. And this is the thing I don't understand. This is the thing that still baffles me to date. Last year we were on the streets on a narrative of tribeless, leaderless, but united by one agenda, which is good governance. And the reason I'm still baffled by this is because 1 year later, we are now spewing tribal hate openly in social media platforms. And even when you talk to people on the ground, if you walk into clubs or places where people are hanging out and just discussing politics, you'll still feel the political hate. You still feel this tribal hate when it comes to talking politics. Oh, this tribe, they are like this. Even you can see their leaders. Oh, this tribe is like this. Their leaders don't even develop the country. You can see how they behave. Such types of conversation. And do you know where all this started? Because last year we were under a tribeless unity. These all started when political leaders started appealing again to their tribesmen. Okay? And I have to say this started with Rigathi Gachagua, as after the government, the sitting government was elected, when he was still deputy president, he had this loyalty towards Kikuyus and the Murima people, and that kind of started this, marginalization of Kikuyus that we're seeing online. And after that, others started picking up on it. So we also had leaders from the Nilotic region, the Kalenjins and the Luos, who also started to speak for their tribes, right? But being that the originator of this narrative is Rigathi, is the one who gets beat up on it for it most of the times, but the others are still doing it. And what they are doing is they are pitting these tribes against each other. And this is the problem. Within the last 1 year, when Rigathi, the period after which Rigathi has been impeached, this narrative has, gotten louder. He's doing a great job exposing the government, but tribal hate, or rather, not necessarily tribal hate, but putting or pinning your whole agenda on a tribal basis it has created this tribal tension we are seeing. And now we have other leaders also spewing up this type of narrative, and now the country is like, hey, your people, your people. And this is the problem. I strongly believe that these politicians that we have in Kenya are not as intelligent as the citizenry, and it's evident. You can see the way they move, the way they think. You can see the way they shape their politics. Okay, they might be political geniuses, but that's the only thing. Political genius, for you to be a political genius, you don't really have to know much. You just have to understand sociology. But the problem with that is these people are zero when it comes to development agendas. These people are zero when it comes to policies that improve the government, the country. These people are zero when it comes to things that push, food security, internal security forward. They are zero when it comes to matters diplomacy. They are zero when it comes to matters, that give the country the gravitas, the development, the big name, the comfort, the standard of living that it's deserving of. But as far as politics is concerned, geniuses. That's the problem. The citizenry is being duped into hating one another by a political class that is less intelligent than they are. Because I strongly believe within the citizenry, if you hear the people and you speak to them genuinely, you'll hear them making very valid suggestions on how to improve the country. But guess what? None of these politicians are taking note of any of these things. It's like for them, they can't even conceptualize it. But then these people are also going to be, bought into the idea of tribalism by these politicians they seem to disregard so much. You disregard a president because of what he's not doing or what he's doing to the country, and it's affecting the country in a negative way. But the moment this president starts instigating tribalism, then you're backing him up. You start backing someone who has, what do we say? You start backing up a politician who deep down, this person has no capacity to improve this country, but still you back them up. And that's the problem. That's the problem that you're facing as a country. So now, I want to appeal to you guys, as someone who hates tribalism, and I think we're 62 years now, I think, I don't know. Yes, because we got independence in 63. So yeah, we're 62 years after independence. 62 years later, we should have gotten out of that state of mind where we now start thinking, that state of mind that forces us to think along tribal lines. We should have gotten out of that state so many years back. Right now, we should have been focusing on development. We should be focusing on agendas that push the country forward. And in any case, within those 62 years, the country has opened up in ways that we have never seen. We have tribal intermarriages, we have tribal migrations, we have these places that are basically metropolitans that, that are multi-ethnic. We have multi-ethnic cities in this country. We have people mingling with one another. We have movement. We have to exist as one people. So anyone who's pushing the narrative of tribalism to you, please, 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 for the love of all that is good and holy for this country, do not buy into it. And in any case, I don't care how much of a sweet talker they are. Don't buy into that narrative, bro. Don't buy into it. Alright, can you imagine hating a Kamba for being a Kamba? Or hating a Luo because they're a Luo? Or hating a Kikuyu because they're a Kikuyu, or Kisii because they're a Kisii? Hating someone from Coast because they're from Coast? Like, think about it, man. Think about it. And on top of hating them for their tribe, the other reason you're hating them is because leader X said, or politician Y said you should do it. Unabebewa akili with someone who is akona akili ndogo kukuliko. You're allowing a politician with low IQ to govern your thought process, and you're following suit without necessarily questioning the agenda of this person, and if the narrative they're pushing is a progressive one. You really need to think. You really need to go back to the drawing board, and if you really think about it, every region in this country has contributed to the good name that this country has. Kikuyus with the business mind and the development, I think they have pushed about a good 50-60 something percent of the development in this country based on business and entrepreneurship alone. A majority of the billionaires in this country alone come from the Kikuyu region, and it's not a coincidence. It's because these people are business minded, and anytime the economy has had a boost is because a Kikuyu somewhere thought of improving this country through business, creating employment and stuff like that, and that is their contribution to the economy or to this country's name. Tourism as a sector is dependent on only two regions of this country, Coast and the Maasai region by large. Why? Because the Maasai, Samburus, Turkanas, they have stayed true to their culture, and their culture alone is a tourist attraction. Not to mention, majority of the game parks come from their region, the Maasai regions, the Turkana regions, the Samburu regions, all those. Kajiado County and Narok, with the Maasai Mara. And then there's the coastal region as well. These two are carrying a good 70% of our tourism sector, right? Yet when one of them fucks up, we are so quick to castigate the whole tribe. Why? Like, do you see the stupidity in tribalism the way I see it? Do you really see? We all have contributed to something that makes this country great, but we are so quick to hate one another when one of us fucks up. It's not even the whole tribe, just one of us. It's the same thing that happened in 2007. All that violence was because one man and his cocoon of friends, or his group of friends, Kibaki and his political class at the time, they rigged the election. But the whole tribe suffered. And the entire country was in chaos because people were killing each other because of the injustice committed by one man. Ebu angalieni tu hiyo ujinga. Mko huku chini mnauona kama kuku because politician flani. Grow a brain, man. We need to grow a brain. And that being said, that's the end of this video. I'll see you in the next one.